All right, everybody, welcome back to the best hour of their day. We are minus one, actually minus a half, probably.
One half for sure.
It's one half of Jay Ackerman. Today it's just going to be Todd Okudo, the Ocho Cinco, and myself. And Jay is off gallivanting in Colorado. I don't know what they're doing. He said he was going to go for a hike today. I don't know how those little short legs are going to do on the mountain, though. But what we're going to talk about today is something that is wildly uncomfortable for people to discuss in the affiliate level because it just gets there's a lot of back and forth, and there's been a lot of discussion with what is RX? What the hell does that mean? How do I communicate that to people? There's a lot of controversy with regard to like what is RX and what is not RX, and should people check that box? Should they not check the box? And does it even matter if they check the box? All of that stuff. So I guess my question for you, Todd, is for Todd at Drive Fitness, what is RX?
Yeah, at Drive Fitness, we have an RX that the coaches know, but as far as like weights are concerned, that's never something that is put out in our program on a daily basis. So like in the coaches' notes, here's the prescribed weight, and the understanding with that is that our best athletes should be able to do this weight and it should look and feel like this. But we don't put that out to the athletes individually because it's our job as coaches to ensure that our athletes feel that same stimulus that the top athletes have with that same workout. So for example, if it's something that has a heavy power clean in it or something like that, should it be unbroken sets? Should it be power single? Should it be small sets, whatever that is? And then it's our job to take that and apply that to our members.
So you don't give your athletes any weights ever like that? You don't have like use Fran, for instance. It's just, is it 21, 15, 9 thrusters and pull-ups with no weight attached to it?
Yeah, that's what's written on the board, right? And that's what's on our online programming. And then in the class, it'll be something like, hey guys, we're looking for this first set to be done either unbroken or at most one break. There might be something said to where, hey, we're not going any heavier than 95 pounds today, something like that. But for the most part, it's our job as coaches to address each athlete and let them know what that weight's going to be.
Have you guys always done that?
We have.
So you didn't have to make a transition away from writing weights at some point?
I didn't, because I started coaching at another gym and just kind of saw how that impacted the environment where people would see the weights on the board and be like, hey, I'm an RX athlete, so I guess that means that I need to do this at that weight, even if they didn't meet the stimulus of the workout. So I wanted to nip that in the bud once we opened our doors. And so we started from the beginning in that fashion, just so we don't have arguments. So we don't really have many people come to us and like complain or try to do weights that they shouldn't do. If you've been there long enough, you might have earned the right to negotiate with me. If I tell you that you should, I want you doing 135 and you're like, yeah, but Jimmy did 155 and I really want to compete with him. Is that cool? It's like, all right, well, here's my parameters. I need you to be able to do a set of 5 unbroken. And if you don't do that, then you and I both know the weights are going to come off in the middle of the workout, and then we'll just go from there. So
that's interesting. So I'm going to kind of put you on the spot here a little bit because obviously your athletes don't know any better. So this is not a transition that you would have to potentially undergo. However, if you were running an affiliate that was putting weights on there, so right or wrong, regardless of how you feel about it, and you decided that it was in the athlete's best interest and in the culture that you're trying to build, how would you go about making that transition? Because you and I both know there's going to be a little bit of an uproar when you change, I don't know, anything.
Yeah.
If you put the toilet paper on the other way, like you're going to get a nasty email. So much less talking about like changing the style of programming.
Yeah, I think it turns into starting to educate your clients on the stimulus of the workout and what this should look and feel like as far as the workout goes down, what the time domain needs to be. You want everybody finishing relatively similar as far as time domains go. And then there's a portion of it where you've got to start to figure out how to de-emphasize or devalue the leaderboard. And that's one of the things that we try to do. It's like, we want everybody going hard. We want everybody trying to be better than they were yesterday. We want people to be able to compete with each other, but ultimately, like, we don't make a big deal out of RX or scaled. And another way to that we've been successful with that is that everybody in our gym scales workouts. So we don't have like the top 5 athletes that can always do it RX. There are days where workouts are written for our best athletes, but they come in and they're not feeling it and they're not afraid to scale it down and do a little bit less. And so when everybody else in the gym sees that even the leaders, the coaches, the best athletes aren't afraid to scale in order to meet the stimulus, there's less pushback. So my thing would be educate your clients on what the stimulus is and then lead by example by not being afraid to scale when it's appropriate, and do that in front of your clients so they can see you doing that as well.
So I think there's kind of 2 conversations that I'm having in my head right now that work in parallel. The first one is I think to some degree the demonization of RX is unwarranted. And I mean that from the stance of, I don't think most people actually understand what the intent was with when they created that. So first and foremost, CrossFit, we define our terms, everything is measurable, observable, repeatable. And we would probably not be having this podcast with the growth of CrossFit, as stupid as this might sound, if there was not a program created that was created in the light of, I can measure one human being right next to another human being. And in order to do that, just like we do at the CrossFit Games, there has to be some standards as far as like, this is the weight, these are the reps, now we're going to see what can get done. And then where I think is people took that and probably swung the pendulum a little bit too far the other way, forgetting, and myself included, forgetting to take into context the athletes that are in front of us and what should be dialed up that is appropriate for them. So that's the first one, is that like, you have to have something that's measurable, observable, and repeatable. The second thing I think is that this can be problematic for gym owners or people who are programming, because I don't think a lot of people put enough time into understanding the workout that they've created. Like, what is supposed to happen in this workout, right?
Yeah.
And then that, in my experience, that can be illustrated based on how the whiteboard brief goes. Like, a coach who understands the stimulus, or like what is RX for the workout, can alleviate most problems at the whiteboard brief, right? I don't know how you feel about that, but like.
Yeah, I think either at the whiteboard brief or just in the culture you've created within the gym, to where it's like people come in, they see either a movement that maybe they can't do, or they've heard the rumors on the weight's supposed to be heavy throughout the day, and they show up, and like, you either alleviate that at the whiteboard by telling them, hey guys, this is what I'm looking for. This is how many sets. This is what the weight should feel like or look like, or the movement should look like or feel like. And then you've hopefully also earned their confidence in the sense that in the numerous workouts beforehand, you've scaled them appropriately and led them in the right direction. And so now they trust you. They walk in and they're like, I know Todd's going to take care of me. And even though I can't do muscle ups today, I know he's going to have something for me that's going to give me a good workout, and that's going to, help push me towards that end state.
So this again is unique to you. So you guys don't do that. Is there a time that's appropriate at Drive Fitness where you guys would put weights on the workout?
I think at this point, it's just part of our culture that we don't, but there are workouts where the weights are known. Like, Fran shows up, any and everybody that sees that, even though it doesn't say 95-65 on our platform or on our whiteboard, people look up and be like, oh, I've done that before. Here's what the weights are supposed to be. Or there's days where we following the CrossFit Games, we did a week of some of the workouts from the CrossFit Games, right? And people will come in and we'll do the workouts, the scaled version of that. And they'll be like, well, what was the RX on that? Or I saw these guys doing it at that weight. And it just blows their mind, right? So people know what the quote unquote RX weight is most of the time, but we've devalued it so much by not writing it down to where we just don't have a lot of people pushing or trying to do something that isn't appropriate. The other thing that we do that I'm unsure of whether other gyms do is, like, we don't leave scaling up to our clients. Like I've heard a lot of other people talk about, hey guys, make sure you pick a weight that allows you to do X, Y, and Z. Whereas like no one picks a weight that I don't tell them that they do. So it's like they might have a little bit of ability to start adding some weight, but I'm going to check in with you, you know?
So, but you're not saying that they don't have, I guess for me, it's different. So I kind of agree with you and kind of disagree. So if it's a newer athlete, I agree with you. If it's a seasoned athlete, that's far more of a conversation than it is me mandating what has to go on the bar.
Well, and that's the person, if it's a seasoned athlete, that's the person that has potentially earned the right to negotiate with me. You know, if it's, hey, Jay, we're doing Diane today, and I know your deadlift's not your greatest movement, right? And I'm like, man, I'd really like to see you do it at 185 because I think you can do this under 5 minutes at that weight. And you're like, man, but I'd really like to see where I'm at 225. I know I'm going to be a little bit slower, but I really want to do it RX today. Well, if we've worked together long enough, I'll potentially allow you to do that on this day, knowing that you're going to be a little bit longer. And that's fine for today, because down the road or tomorrow, you're going to listen to what I recommend as far as the weights are concerned. But I don't like, very rarely is there just blind trust that I allow everybody to pick their own weights and pick their own scaling options. And I don't check in at least to make sure that we're on the same page.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, that's just good coaching is if there's 15 athletes in your class, like I'm going to verify 15 different rep schemes, movements, and loads on
Yes.
those athletes. Now, how you go about that, you can do that a lot of different ways. But no, I agree with you there. But for at least for the way we run it, for my newer athletes, I just spoon feed them. I'm like, you're going to put 65 on the bar. This is what you're going to do. For my other athletes, we might go back a little bit, because I do have athletes that will go a little bit lighter when I know they should go heavier, and I'll be like, hey, put 10 pounds on there. Like, don't sandbag today. Like, unless you're telling me you don't feel good. And then I'm like, okay, well then dial it back even more than that. Like, if you don't feel good, let's just use it as a moving day. But okay.
Yeah. Same page with that.
So a lot of people are listening to this and they're like, well, good for you, Todd. Like, great. You've developed that culture at your gym. However, at my gym, CrossFit Donuts and Sprinkles, I have athletes that only want to check the RX box regardless of what unfolds. So for that person who's just like, listen, I have a person who did Fran RX and it took them 22 minutes. What's your thoughts on that scenario right there? That's not an uncommon story.
Right.
But there's new coaches that may have not built the culture that you've built and may not have, we'll call it the expertise that you have. What's your recommendation to somebody who's dealing with that?
There's got to be an understanding of why somebody's so tied to RX, right? So you got to get to know them a little bit to try to figure out why it's so important for them to do this thing RX if it's going to take them 22 minutes. And then there's got to be the understanding of why they're doing that, and then the education of why it's important to scale it down to where they can do this thing appropriately. And I don't think that conversation is going to happen on one day, or that understanding is going to happen on one day. But the big takeaway from that, especially with new coaches, is like every athlete in your class is on your watch, right? So if somebody tries to RX a workout and it is going to be unsafe for them or inappropriate for them, and they end up getting hurt, they're not going to leave class and be like, oh man, I got hurt because I was an idiot trying to do more weight than I was supposed to, or more reps than I was supposed to. They're going to leave and they're going to go, I got hurt doing CrossFit in Todd's class at Todd's gym. Todd's a bad coach and his gym's a bad gym. And it's like, when you're the coach on the floor, like your reputation is at stake. And so there's got to be some boundaries, and you've got to figure out how to keep people in check and not just let somebody do what they want to do because they want to.
So in this scenario, I'm going to circle back just a little bit. So, well, actually before that, if you had an athlete, let's say you're at CrossFit Donuts and Sprinkles, and you had an athlete who does Fran at the RX weight, at the RX reps, and they do it in 22 minutes, would you allow that athlete to, whatever system let's say it's Wodify, that's what we use, would you allow them to check that little red box that says RX?
See, I don't care about that at all. So
okay.
They can do whatever they want to as far as that's concerned. I'm not going to go in and tell somebody not to. Now I'm probably naive and ignorant in that I don't care. I know there's other people in the gym potentially that would be more concerned when people put RX and they didn't necessarily do RX, but I just don't care about that. So as far as I'm concerned, you guys can RX or scale whatever you want to. That kind of stuff doesn't impact me very much.
I definitely, again, a mild amount of maturity on my part is a lot of people get wrapped around that interaction, which is symptom of a bigger problem, which is you have not educated this person on what was supposed to unfold. So for me, I see RX as much more these days of did you get the intended stimulus versus did you get the exact reps and the exact loading. Now, if we can check all three boxes, that's ideal. If I can check all three boxes of get the appropriate loading with the movements intact, the appropriate rep scheme, and hit the intended stimulus, whether it's rounds or reps or time, that for me is perfect scenario. One step below that, the next best scenario is that we hit the intended stimulus, not getting to the reps or the loading, right? So I don't know how many people look at that, and I think a lot of people will value the reps and load over the intended stimulus in a lot of scenarios because it's somehow it's a badge of honor, and I get it, right? Like I'm not going to be like that's stupid. I'm not going to like we've all been there,
right?
Done a workout that took way too long, but I think over time, what we have to do is educate our clients and really get them. I think this goes back to I think Jay and I talked about on a previous podcast. Is sometimes you have to tell people what is not supposed to happen.
Yeah. I mean, to some degree, right? Hey guys, this workout shouldn't take 22 minutes. Like,
exactly.
Yeah, you say that and then reinforce that it needs to take 5 minutes or 8 minutes or whatever it is. But it all boils down to, from my experience and what I've seen and what I've experienced, because I used to be one of those athletes that'd be like, well, I've got to do it RX. And I would get crushed and it'd take me forever. And I had to learn some humility in that. And that's what's led me down this trail now. But it also boils back to like, what are you emphasizing in your gym? Is it like, are you more concerned with pushing everybody to be RX? Or are you more concerned with people hitting the stimulus and, in my opinion, more importantly, moving really well? I'm more concerned with somebody moving well than anything else. And number two, what example do you set? So if you and your other coaches or the people that are the quote unquote leaders in your gym are the ones that don't scale down and maybe take a workout that should be 8 minutes long and you do it RX and it takes you 12 minutes, like you're setting the example that scaling is not an okay thing and that the stimulus is not as important. When you lead by example and you scale on the days when you need to and you try to move really, really well while you're in there and you hit the stimulus, and people look and they're like, okay, this is the way it's supposed to be done. That's what I've seen from my experience.
I would agree with you. And I think that peer pressure works. And if nobody wants to be that person who's last, right? Like even if they're slinging big weights, right? Like they don't want to be last. So if everybody in the gym has basically, they've come in and they've acclimated to what the environment is and there's that one person who doesn't want to get along, eventually they're going to move along, whether it's via you as the owner telling them they got to go, or they will just assimilate and do it the way it's supposed to. But it does take time. But you brought up something interesting, which is about moving well. And I'm thinking about this now, like what if RX was based on quality of movement?
Yeah. How many people would have an RX score in your gym?
I mean, it wouldn't be nearly as sexy because, like right out of the gate, everybody would have to slow down. So this does kind of go into the whole technique and intensity discussion, right? It's like how do I balance those two while kind of moving my athletes towards that RX variation or version of the workout, with the understanding that I may never get there. Like, how do you as a coach balance that?
I think just through what I've discussed, man, it's like we emphasize quality of movement and the stimulus of the workout. That's the example that we set as coaches and leaders. So we're constantly working on our movements. We're jumping into classes. We're practicing the techniques. Our classes are built around the specific warm-up. So we probably spend more time doing specific warm-ups than any other gym out there because we we do one piece a day, and the focus is learning the movement of those movements of the day. And so that's the stuff that we emphasize. So, it's one of those things where I'm pretty proud of the way that the majority of the people in my gym move, but we spend a lot of deliberate time working on that.
I'll give everybody an example of something that happened to me in one of my classes less than a week ago. We did, I think it was Friday last week, we did JT, which was the first workout I ever did in CrossFit. I did it RX, and I'm using air quotes here, because I did do those movements in those rep schemes. However, it did take me 37 minutes. So looking back on that, I don't know that necessarily falls in the RX bucket. Now, what I did was, and so a lot of people would look at that workout. So everybody did some variation of that, whether we modified the movements or whether we modified the rep schemes. So I had an athlete, and I told everybody I wanted that workout to be something to the tune of 7 to 15 minutes, right? I give a little bit bigger window because there's a lot of movement redundancy there, and I know people are going to hit muscular failure regardless of how we kind of scale that. And that's a little bit bigger window than I would normally give for a time domain. I had an athlete who was towards the tail end of that 15-minute mark, and this is my fault completely. He was moving pretty well, and I thought he was on the round of 9 when he finished, and he was technically finishing the round of 15. But we're coming up on the 15-minute mark, and I asked him, and I'm like, how many reps you got left? And he's like, I got 2, and then I got to start the round of 9. And all of a sudden, all the alarms start going off. I'm like, holy shit, I have let this cat down. This is not where we should be right now. So I just stopped him. I was like, finish the round of 15, and we're done. Like, we're done. And some people are like, well, but it's just a 9. And I'm like, yeah, but it's not just 9, it's 27, and that's going to take him another 4 minutes, at which point this is now a 20-minute workout. And we have far exceeded the domain of the workout. And I don't think people have the confidence to do that. I'm like, he's good. Like, regardless, he may have not have done the same amount of reps, but it would be the equivalent, so let's say I had scaled appropriately and I had him do 18, 15, 9. Like, there's your 9 reps right there that I'm gonna squeeze him back into, into something that looks like a more appropriate time frame. And that was just something I realized I made a mistake, and I changed it because I'm trying to keep him in that window as much as possible. And he was totally good with it. Quite frankly, he probably wanted to quit.
Oh yeah. Not like you're giving them a way out. I can distinctly remember, mostly because I was an athlete early on, I was like, if I chose to do a workout, even if it was the wrong number of reps and it was way too much, I was like, I want to finish this thing. So I can remember early on when I opened my affiliate, talking to some of our newer coaches and being like, listen, if you mess up the scaling, like, just live with it, because, the athlete that approached the workout is going to want to finish whatever they set out to finish. And I was the opposite of everybody else, because that was what I had in my head. Nobody else wants that. Like, when you find somebody that is struggling and is about to finish 10 minutes after everybody else, nobody wants to be that person. So if you go up to them and check in with them and see that they're a round behind, and you're like, hey, finish after this round, or let's only do, 4 reps instead of 9 reps on this last one, they're going to be like, thank you. I was dying. This is horrible. I appreciate it. Like, you've got to keep the pulse on people and make sure where they're at. I did the same thing yesterday. We had a long hero workout, and I'd scaled somebody that had been out of the gym for about a week. I'd scaled him down and thought it was appropriate. Checked in after the second round, and he was a little bit behind everybody else. And I was like, you know what? Let's cut it down even more. And he's like, thank you. Yes. Okay. I'm good with that.
I've had very little pushback now, right? So I'm not going to be so naive to say that ever, but I am confident saying this. I have had very little, if not almost zero, pushback on making that decision kind of, mid workout, probably in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
Like, I think if you're dialing up workouts that are appropriate and, are designed with intensity in mind, nobody is going to question you. Like, they want you to come up there and save them, but they're not going to do it on their own.
Yeah, absolutely.
We do something. So we started this last year, and it was something that I just kind of had this thought, and I was like, what if we kind of change what is RX, right? And we put all of the emphasis on the stimulus and not so much loading our rep scheme, right? Because so the other argument is like there are athletes that want to check that box, right? So we do have to take into account the athletes, the psychological aspect of this whole thing, which is like, hey, I've been here 3 years, I've never checked the RX box, like this sucks. Like clearly this isn't working because you guys have not moved me to where I need to be. So I do think we have to maybe dial up some things once or twice a month where everybody has the ability to check that box. Like, it's a 5K or it's like, it's all monostructural and or something like that. So if you're not doing that, you probably should do that. Like we have to give people wins because CrossFit is hard.
Yep.
So what we did, we do this for the whole month of November is, and this does take a little bit of work with regard to programming, is we design a workout essentially with the stimulus in mind first, which normally we kind of do it the other way. And then we kind of rearrange things. And then what we do is we give rep ranges and load ranges, right? So let's say it was like Filthy 50. We would give everything from reps 20 to 50. Every single rep scheme in there is available. None of them are wrong, right? So like you literally cannot make a wrong decision. And for the kettlebell swing, it's like, 15 to 35 or whatever that is. And then same thing for the barbell, it could be 15, 25, 30, 45. So what we do is we tell people, I'm like, this is your window for time that I want you to do the Filthy 50 in. Regardless of what rep scheme you use, regardless of what loading you use, if you hit that window, you did the workout as prescribed. There was a little bit of pushback from the people who were just like hardcore zealots, but the result of it was we were really forcing people to think about what was appropriate for them in order to get there. And I think it turned out really well. And we're going to do it again this year. It's going to be like a thing where we do in November now. Now from a coaching standpoint, this does take more work on your part, right? Like you're giving people enough rope to hang themselves. So you have to be ready for people to literally hang themselves and be prepared to catch them and get them into the right spot.
But do you think people, I love the idea of that. And I completely agree that like, I think you're doing a disservice if you don't have opportunities for everybody to do something RX, or you don't have opportunities for everybody to have to scale something. Like there's nobody that should be the either side of this thing. But to some degree, like if 10 people come to your class and all 10, like one person does the Filthy 50 as it's written, and then somebody else does 25 reps with lighter weights and they put RX, do you really think that they feel like they did the same thing as somebody else and that their RX is appropriate?
I think it's all about delivery, right? So I do think the answer is yes, because we did get that when we did it. And it's because we put the emphasis on like, hey, if you get in this window, because again, we all know like CrossFit's, intensity is relative to physical, psychological tolerances. So first of all, somebody who does it RX is probably like, something in there like mid 20s to mid 30s, right? So younger person, and the person who's scaling is probably not in that age range for the most part. So I've never seen anybody where they're just like talking shit about the person who scaled and
no, right.
So you're just a jerk if you're doing that, but everybody gets it. But it does give everybody, for me, we use it as a learning tool. Like, so I wanted to put some of the ownership on the athletes. And I will say this, when we pitch this idea to the members, I do tell them that I want them to miss the mark about 30% of the time in both directions, right? So I want them to occasionally throughout the month dial up a rep scheme that might be a little high or loading that might be a little high, but I also want them to dial up basically a weight that might be a little bit lighter so that they can go faster. So if they hit it every single time, now what we're not doing is kind of like trying to expand the margins of our experience. So I tell them I want them to miss, but not just by making it harder. Like sometimes I want you to undershoot because you went so damn fast and you came in under the intended time domain or under or over on the rounds or reps or something like that. Yeah. So I give people that opportunity to do that. But like you said, we talk about that. Like I know my athletes pretty well. I have a pretty good idea of what's appropriate for most people, but I do tell them it's appropriate to miss the mark, because now we've learned something. Like now they can carry that experience forward into some of those other workouts when we go back to the irregular stimulus. And like I said, there was a little bit of moaning and groaning, but we started the podcast with that, which is everybody's going to bitch about something. But largely it was a big hit. But like I said, it does take a little bit more forethought from a programming standpoint, and it does take you and the staff to be like very much prepared for what is going to happen for that month.
Really, absolutely.
Really going to do some pre-planning on that. What's your thoughts on just doing away with RX altogether? Like it's just
there needs to be, I think there needs to be something in there that dictates what the stimulus is going to be. So how do you determine, is the weight supposed to be heavy or light? Are the reps supposed to be unbroken or not? Whatever. So there needs to be something there that dictates that. Other than that, I think that's the main focus, right? Is like we've talked about this whole time, is what is the stimulus? That's the ultimate goal, not just checking the red box. So
I'm just trying to play devil's advocate here, because most of us, that was not a thing before CrossFit. Like it was just not something that existed. Like you and I both played, athletics in college. And when I went to the weight room, there was nobody was like, hey, you have to do this in 4 minutes, or like, this is the exact weight you have to use when you do it. Like most of it was percentage based, and there was some stuff in there.
But on a similar sense, there was like, hey, what's that guy over there doing? Let me see if I can do as much as he did. Like that was always a part of it, whether it was written as prescribed or times or not. It's like, I saw what he was doing, and if he was the guy that I was trying to compete with, I either wanted to do the same thing or a little bit more, or I wanted to do it, a little bit faster than he did, or jump a little bit higher, or whatever that was. So I think it's always been a part of it. It just wasn't defined. It wasn't shown like it, like it is now.
Which brings up kind of the old Glassmanism, which is like, men will die for points. So we know that that RX component of CrossFit programming does inherently breed competition. And some people would be in the camp of like, hey, their competition has no place in fitness in the weight room. What's your thoughts on that?
I disagree with that. I mean, ultimately, what I try to say and what we try to educate is that you're competing with yourself, but we also all know that there's at least a handful of people out there that you're also competing with. And that's what makes it fun, because you're right, we will die for points, right? And so having those, trying to be better than you were the day before is important. But then having a couple people around you to shoot for makes it a lot more enjoyable as well. It's like, as disappointed as I am that the Open's coming back up, I get another chance to beat Jay in 5 straight workouts again.
I'm disappointed that you're even competing with that guy. Like, I don't even know why that.
You're right. That's not even a thing. It allows me to keep my ego high because it's an automatic
win. So I do very much disagree with the demonization of competition. I just think that competition has to be tempered, right? Yes. So I think from a coach and from a box owner standpoint, like that's our job, is to moderate that competition, right? You have to be the voice of reason when people like most of us are like racehorses. Like everybody's like, oh, I'm not competitive until I line up next to somebody, and then suddenly I fucking want to win for some reason. Right. Like nobody knows why, but like that's just inherent. That's just human nature. So it's our job to really kind of paint that picture of like, hey, this is what is supposed to unfold today. That is the intent. Because the other thing I think that needs to be discussed is, I'm not even really sure that I've ever heard people talk about this that much, but most people are only talking about the RX component in the confines of one day, right? So if we're thinking about what is supposed to unfold over a month or several months or even a couple of weeks, making a poor decision on like going RX has like second and third order effects for the rest of your training week. Yeah. Right. So I think it's sometimes I think it's a little bit weird that we're only having this discussion about one day. And I'm like, what about the rest of the week? Like, what about, what about the next 10 years? Like, what are we doing? Like, is it that important that we do it? Or is RX what we're shooting for down the road? Or is like or should we look at RX in the totality of a 1 month or 2 month or 3 month window? You know?
Yeah, we have a saying sometimes that we'll bring up around our gym is like, you train to train another day, right? You see the look on somebody's face as they pick up the bar, and you can tell it's a little bit heavy and they're a little unsure. And you can just check in with them. Hey, how's that feeling? And they give you that look, and you're like, hey, let's train to train another day. Let's take the weight down a little bit to make sure that you get out of this one alive so you can come back and train tomorrow. It's like, what is the point of RX today? Like you said, if it costs you the rest of the week.
Well, I thought, like what was funny is just like, if you guys haven't listened to the Andrew and Jen Charlesworth podcast, go back and listen to it. But like, I can't believe I say this, but like Charlesworth had like something that was pretty profound. He was like, hey, listen, a samurai doesn't have competition every day. He's just like, because on competition day, like somebody's going to die. So if we treated our training like that a little bit more, I think it would probably be more fun. Yeah, even Spencer Hindle brought this up. He's like, I just don't have the palate for like sustained high intensity that I used to. Like it just hurts, and I don't either. Like I think once you just get a taste of it, like once you, it is an acquired taste, so you can get back to it. But once you've kind of like decided, like I've got enough fitness, going any harder than this is gonna really, really cost me.
Devastating. It's so hard. Yeah, that was like when I started working seminars with people that made it to the games every year, like the first question I would ask each one of them is like, how do you do that to yourself every single day? It's like I can do one hard workout like that like every month. I'm still trying to recover from last year's Open. I still hurt, and that was 5 workouts once a week, and I'm still trying to figure out how to dial up the intensity again. I agree with you. So it's like when I'm working out, I'm trying to think about how can I move better? Not how hard can I go at all costs. And you try to emphasize that with everybody else in your gym. I think you were making mention of like, how do I keep people from just trying to compete at all costs with the person next to them on a daily basis? I think one thing we found success with is that we have way more benchmarks and we test them way more often nowadays. And so people are continually getting a chance to compete with themselves, which I think helps feed that competition, but it focuses it in the right direction. It's like if you are doing a benchmark roughly once a week that you're going to do 3 times or 4 times over the course of the year, you're going to have an opportunity to see your personal improvements and try to be better than you were the last time. So you don't need every single day to look to the person next to you and like go so hard at it that like that's your time to shine. It's like we give a lot more opportunities to do that by doing a lot more benchmarks and testing yourself against yourself.
So is that kind of the frequency with which you guys test benchmarks? About once a week?
About once a week. I've got currently, I think for this year, every year we mix it up, but I've got 18 different benchmarks, and that's workouts, it's lifts, it's skill tests, it's things like that. It's 18 different ones, and I'm guaranteed to test them 3 times a year, at least 3 times a year. So that roughly works out to almost 1 a week. One of those things pops up once a week. And it's worked out really, really well. It's forces people to, do the same thing over and over again, and gives people a chance to see where they're at.
So I dig that. We probably don't test as much as we should. And I think that's probably due to some inherent bias that I have to kind of like push people away from like trying to go full ham, like every time they come in the gym. Because I do have some crazy people in my gym, right? I'm just like, listen, this person's literally going to run through a wall if I ask them to. So it's like,
yeah, but if the tests are varied enough, it doesn't matter, right? It's like you've got Fran where they're going to run through a wall, and then it's like a 5K run. Cool, go for it. And then the next one is max unbroken double unders. Cool, go for it. Like you're not going to kill yourself doing that. It's not a thing, right? Or max burpees in a minute. Yeah, you can go really, really hard for a minute, but like, you know what I mean? As long as there's variance there, it's not Elizabeth, Diane, Fran. Like it isn't those things every single time to where you can, ratchet it up so much that you're just getting absolutely crushed.
I think one way to kind of, I guess like modulate that would be, and I did a podcast, which we haven't released yet, with a buddy of mine named Judd Dean. He's got CrossFit First Aid up in Delaware, and he had a master's athlete that won the games this year. He does a lot of online programming, and he said one of the things that he looks at, there's kind of 3 factors that he looks at. with regard to programming, and it's volume, intensity, and frequency. And at any given point, he never wants more than 2 of those to be high, right? So and what he's doing is, and again, nothing is perfect here, but it is an interesting way to look at it, which is because if I have all 3 of those high all the time, it's just not sustainable. At some point, you're going to have this dramatic drop off in your output, whether the volume is too high while trying to maintain super high intensity and your frequency is too high, meaning you're training too many times in a given time period. So trying to mix those around, and at the very least, taking them into account. Frequency is not something that you can really control with regard to like programming for an affiliate, but I could look at volume and intensity and then try to make sure that I'm not pegging both of those to the ceiling every single day in order to maximize some of that stuff.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it always boils back down to good varied programming, right? Like you can't, if you've got varied programming, the absolute intensity of the day is not going to be super high. Like I hear people talk about this all the time, like CrossFit shouldn't be high intensity. It should be moderate intensity. And the reality of it is it's relative intensity. And ultimately, if you are varying your programming, like the intensity that I get in a 30-minute workout's not going to be the same as I get in Fran. And so as long as I'm not doing Fran or a 2-minute thing every single day, I'm not going to be killing myself. It's just not a thing. Like the different time domains is what allows you to moderate the intensity plus people's relative intensity. So it's like, I'm not going to feel the same way after doing a 5K as I do after Fran, after I do having, 5x3 front squats. And if those are 3 things that show up in your week on 3 different days, like that's good varied workouts. That's good varied intensity. And it's, that in my opinion, that's what it should look like in an affiliate. No, and it takes care of those things that you covered before.
Which is exactly where I was going to go with this is if you really, like, let's just say you're not skilled in like getting people to buy in and like getting your athletes to understand that, you can just avoid the discussion altogether, which is, but this is now a discussion about programming, which means I can't be programming like multiple things in a day if I'm not programming a 5K or things that exceed 25 minutes, which inherently are going to bring the intensity down. I'm just making it harder for myself. It's almost like shooting yourself in the foot from a coaching standpoint. It's just like, listen, if you're not dialing those things up, something that looks like a 40-minute monostructural day of row, bike, ski erg, and run, well, that's a real easy way to make sure that people don't go full stupid, right? Because you can't do that. Like it's not possible for
it's not a thing,
like there. So if you're an affiliate owner or a coach and you're having issues, really kind of get people to stay within the bounds of intensity, like take a real hard look at your programming. Like you might just be setting yourself up for failure because you just programmed, like you said, a series of workouts that are incredibly high intensity. I've got Fran, Diane, Elizabeth, and I don't know, and something else that falls in that, for sure sub 10-minute time domain, and just smashing people.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on, because you brought it up earlier about having, I shouldn't have everybody hitting the mark all the time, like RX plus variation, right? Like you should be programming things that like nobody does RX in your gym.
Yeah. I mean, I same deal, like RX plus.
Regardless of what you call it, right? Like it doesn't really matter. Competition variation or whatever. Like, I know some people call it that.
Very rarely are there like people that get scaled up for things. One, because I don't think it's necessary. Like if you program for the best people in your gym, that workout is intended for them, right? The opportunities that we will take to do that is like, hey, if somebody wants to try the 25-pound medicine ball for their wall ball shots today or a 30-pound one, okay, maybe you can try that. Or you want to go a little heavier in the kettlebell swing, cool, you can grab a heavier kettlebell. You want to mix in some chest to bar pull-ups, but it still needs to happen within the realm of the stimulus of the workout. If we're doing Fran, we're not scaling up to 135 thrusters and, chest to bar pull-ups just because you've got a 3-minute Fran. Otherwise, it's like that. We're not going to do that. I want you to still try to hit the stimulus. So it kind of depends on the workout.
What if you had a 2-minute Fran?
if you had a 2-minute Fran, then you're outside of the realm of this conversation, in my opinion. Like
That
we're
means
talking
I'm
about
outside of the realm. That I did it once. I did it once.
You did it once. Show up and do it today.
219.
All right. I guess you're Mr. RX athlete. We need to put a weight vest on you and do it at 135.
Done. Chest to bar. I do think that I do think there's two things that every coach and gym owner should take a look at. One is take a look at the programming, make sure you're not setting yourself up for failure. And then two, take a look at what you and your staff are doing, and are you setting an example? Like both of those things go top down. And I think you can avoid all these issues with people wanting to check the RX button for no particular reason other than like it's just this arbitrary number, and that's what I've tried to explain to a lot of my athletes. I'm like, it doesn't mean anything. Like we need a metric for measurement, and that's the only reason it exists. Outside of that, it's just an arbitrary number that we have there as a placeholder. Like it doesn't actually mean anything.
Yep. Completely agree.
Cool. I think we've covered this pretty well. Anything we left out, you think?
Man, I feel like we've been talking in circles on this thing for a minute. Kind of got on some tangents. I think it's been good, but
tangents are good, but I do think this is something that a lot of people struggle with, like gym owners and coaches. They're just like, listen, like, and you've seen it at the level 1, level 2. They're like, every seminar, I've got an athlete that at all costs wants to check this box, right? Like, how the hell do I manage that?
Yeah, look yourself in the mirror. Make sure that the leadership is showing the right, showing the right example, and then what are you emphasizing within the walls of your gym? If the culture is that RX and thrashing yourself is the most important thing, well, then that's what everybody's going to do. And when you wonder why that's the case, it's because that's what you're emphasizing.
Yeah.
If moving well and hitting the stimulus is what you emphasize and you don't care about RX, nobody else is either. So, figure out what it is that you guys are promoting within your gym, and that's what's going to happen. Like the people in your gym are a direct reflection of either the owners of the gym or whoever is running the gym and whoever the prominent quote unquote leaders are there, and whatever example you're setting.
I think something else that we failed to bring up, and I just thought about this because it's something we talk about when coaching athletes when they're moving is so we talk about like how to effectively cue athletes and get them into good positions, but we also don't want to leave out acknowledgement of good movement. And something else we can do, and from an affiliate owner, is acknowledgement of good decisions with regard to your athletes that scale appropriately. So we can use, again, that desire for people to get a pat on the back kind of against them, which is we can celebrate the people that made good decisions and ignore the people who made bad decisions. And we do that. And eventually people want that pat on the back and they will come along. Now, when they make the good decision, you got to make a big deal of it, right? So that they can that good kind of behavior, if you will. But that's another thing that I've found to be super helpful is like acknowledging people that scaled. And if you look at the end of a class and everybody scaled appropriately and everybody's where you wanted them, like bring it up, like tell your class, like, hey guys, this went perfectly. Like everybody did exactly what they're supposed to. Good job on making good scaling decisions. Like that was fantastic. And I think people really appreciate that. And you've kind of gotten rid of that whole, like, we got to check this RX box. So, cool. All right. This is good. I think we should leave Jay out forever. Basically at this point, he can just stay. Guys, if you got questions about RX in general or any of that stuff, check Instagram too. And I think a lot of this has to go back with just from a coaching standpoint, understanding the stimulus of workout so you can communicate that effectively to your athletes. Putting a post up about like, can you guys kind of look at a workout and start to determine the stimulus of workout with not a lot of time. And that's a good way to start kind of get yourself dialed in. But we'll be back again tomorrow for a more best hour of your day. If you guys got questions about anything, if it's about the mentor group, if it's about questions about any coaching stuff that you guys want to see, hit us up on Instagram, and we'll see you guys next time.